Okay, right, so I'm going to talk to you about my role that I've been undertaking as a Foret School leader and different aspects of that and how that sort of comes together as a whole to create what Foret School is. The first thing is a Foret School leader needs to encourage certain aspects of learning. They need to foster a resilience in the learners, a confidence, independence, a creativity, build on their self-esteem and their emotional intelligence. And at first, that's a terrifying amount of things to do. It is breathtakingly deep and difficult to understand. But in a way, we can break up the role of the Foret School leader into little sections, which makes it easier to understand all that, to break it down at different points. And I've sort of looked at that and I thought, well, you've got to be an adaptable planner. You've got to be able to change what you're doing. And sometimes that means having an idea and changing it when you're actually there doing it. You have to be an observer to see what's happening. That can be as a result of an activity or even sort of the social and emotional things that are going on within the Foret School itself. You have to be a role model. You have to be a risk taker as well as a risk assessor. Now, what I'm going to do now is just go through some of those points and just talk about them a bit more in more detail. As a planner, when I go out and I start thinking about what I'm going to do in my Foret School, I try and think about the theories that I want to really push into my sessions. And really, I've come up with sort of three that I try and follow as best as I can. Those are Maslow's hierarchy, holistic development in general, and Gardner's multiple intelligences. The reason why I chose these is because they really help foster the key things we are looking for in Foret School. They foster that resilience, the confidence, the independence, the creativity, all of those things. They really push through those if you do them well. Now, Maslow's hierarchy is about creating a pyramid where at the very peak, students attain knowledge, they access things, they are more creative and independent. And to get to that point, they have to be supported by things like their physical needs. They need to have enough sleep, they need to be rested and well fed, they need to be warmed and looked after, they need to be looked after, they need to have their physical and then their social needs met. And that sort of builds up to the point where they're able to learn and work independently. It kind of links in with how holistic development works, where it looking at the whole child as a whole. Not just saying, we're going to learn this today, but looking at them and thinking, are they ready to learn this? Do they understand themselves? Do they understand their emotions? Do they understand the emotions of others they're working with? Are they really looking towards their physical, the emotional, the social, the spiritual, and their mental health? Because if they're all secure in that, they're in a comfortable place where they're able to understand how to succeed, able to take risks without really worrying about the mistakes they're going to make themselves. Now, they're very much about prepping and looking after a learner until they're in the place where they can learn. Gardner's multiple intelligences talks about more how students will learn, how those learners will use the space. What I mean by that is that in traditional sort of teaching and learning, we've always talked about the three things of audio, visual, kinesthetic. What Gardner tends to do is expand into that and say, well, there are more. People can learn by music, by moving, by investigating in art, as a whole group of different ways. He identifies 7. I know other people have identified more since then. And seeing how a learner is accessing an activity or an experience or the play they are doing is key to really being able to plan further for that person. And that might not stay the same, that might not stay continuous for a learner. One day they might be really needing to run and learn physically, whereas another day that might shift into something a little bit different. I also feel that learners don't just connect themselves to one way of learning. It might be that there are different ways they learn for different needs and in different conditions. So when we're planning, we need to make sure that all these things are going on. We need to make sure that a student's needs are met, that they are thinking about their physical and emotional and their social and spiritual well-being, and that we are thinking about how we're offering those experiences to them. And as much as we like to plan and be able to go out and do what we want to do, that can change when you're out there. A learner might have come from lunch with nothing to eat and not be ready to learn. So we need to be able to make sure that we can offer them a different experience where they're able to get back onto that Maslow's hierarchy, that their physical needs are met within holistic development. Also, these things will change from session to session. They're not going to stay the same. Somebody who's really seems emotionally secure and really confident in holistic development, something could happen to them outside of school, outside of Foret School, which means that could change from session to session, really lower their confidence or even increase it. And again, you need to be able to adapt to your planning to really help that learner out. When we look at these things, all of them, what we're really looking to do is foster that respect and relationship, to meet challenges with resilience. And as a whole, these three ideas, they really do support that, because you're making sure that the learner understands how to respect themselves, how to respect others, how to build relationships, how to be confident. You're really sort of explaining to them and showing them how they can do that. And an interesting example was when we've been out and doing the sessions is during a simple playing game where we wanted to explain the boundaries of the site by playing a game where they go off and they hide around the area, the Foret School area. And it started off where they would just go and they'd hide, all separately in different places. And slowly they would realise that, okay, this person's not very confident about this. And you could see some of them going, well, maybe I'll go and support them. And others would offer to do other things for other learners. And they'd become more of a group. They'd build that relationship and respect to each other. Then they'd start taking that game and changing it to make it more challenging for themselves. And they developed it, and people who were getting upset about being found were slowly becoming more resilient and going, it's okay, we just go and do something different next time. And they were really working well together in a game that was very simple, that they took and developed and really made their own. Now, again, taking all those things together, all that adapting and all that changing really helps to build on their social self-esteem and emotional intelligence. It really, you're asking them to do all these things, but also you're saying, hey, take this, change it, make it your own. How can you build on that? How can you change it? How can you develop it? How can that be part of you? And give them some pride in what they're doing, some real understanding of the whole of what you're doing outside in Foret School. Part of that is also giving time for the pupils to reflect, letting them have time to just step back and go, oh, I did that today, it was really good, or that was scary. It was a worrying thing that we've done. And that time to reflect, sometimes on your own or sharing it with others, helps build that emotional intelligence and self-esteem. It helps build on understanding relationships and understanding yourself. And I think that's really important to the Foret School thing as a whole. The real tricky part of planning for Foret School is to incorporate the child-led play part. Because as much as you want to go off in one direction, a learner might go, I just want to go and sit in this tree. And that's fine. And that can be difficult to bend and adapt what you want to do. And sometimes you have to really act out on your feet thinking, okay, how can I make that fit for this student now? Or do I just leave it? Do I let them play and develop their own learning? big example for that, again, from my own forest school, was that I introduced tools very early on because they were really interested in it. They really wanted to look at it. So I went, okay, we'll look. And we started looking, and they would just get them and break up the wood, cut up the wood, change the shapes, and that would be it. And so as a start, that kind of play and interaction with the woodland and with the tools was fine, because they were challenging each other, they were working in different groups, and they were talking about it. But it got to the point where they were no longer making those next steps. They weren't challenging themselves anymore. It had just become what they were doing. They were just cutting up wood. So I had to adjust what we were doing, adjust the planning of what we were doing, and say, look, why don't we use this bit of wood you've cut up? What can we use it for? Could we make something about it? You know, what could we build a small village with it for creatures that live here? And it ended up being that they worked together to build a little village within the Foret School area using the wood that they'd cut up. So we'd moved them away from just playing with the tools to using the tools to play. And you know, that was part of being really flexible in the planning that we were doing. Now, what happened there is the sort of other thing I mentioned, is how you have to observe what is happening. Because that is always going to inform your planning. It's always going to be part of how you go about offering the different experiences to the pupils, to the learners that are there. And you always have to come back to those key principles that you're adding in, the hierarchy in Maslow, the holistic development, and the multiple intelligences that you're thinking about. Because if you observe there's a lack in one of those, or a special need in one of those, you've then got to take that back to your planning, change it, develop it. And like I've said before, that could be before a session, but more often it's going to be during a session, where you're going to have to change your planning on the spot to really fit the needs of that learner. In my own experiences, I've had one learner who has been very difficult in class, outside sociably. His behaviour was not brilliant. And within the Foret School, he started to become really sensible and really concentrated on his work and on what he was doing, really got into understanding the tools and using the environment. And it became clear that his behaviour in that situation was better, and it was more suitable to the environment, and he was doing so well that I looked and thought, how can I push him further? How can I develop this better understanding of his own sort of social behaviour? And I started pairing these people with others who were struggling to do things, and he took on almost like a leadership role with those children, and he looked after them, he was caring for them, and it really developed his social behaviour, because I observed him doing so well, and you know, in his own emotional intelligence, that I could give him that freedom to help other people, and it was to a big success. He's done really well with that. Again, we need to make sure that when we're looking at pupils, that they have a good level of well-being. That might mean, again, they come hungry, and we make sure that they've got enough energy to get through the session, or they're cold because they haven't got a jacket. You give them some way of keeping warm. It also involves being able to self-regulate emotions and being able to understand how you're feeling. Again, when using the tools, some of the pupils I was with were really reluctant because they were fearful of it. But we talked about during flexion periods, how do you feel before? How do you feel now? Has that changed? Have you gone on a journey? And that, again, period of reflection and how you observe that happening is really important to developing the next stages of the learning in Foret School. One of the key learners I've encountered is a very hyperactive, very busy learner, and he was always rushing from one thing to another, not really understanding what he was doing or understanding why he was doing it. And what I encouraged him to do was to take some time to sit and think about what he was doing and then come and tell me and explain what he was doing. Sometimes he'd do that on his own and actually go off and think and sit for a while and come back and explain what he was doing. And really, that point of reflection really helped him build on those key principles that we were looking at. The other aspect of Foret School leader that I mentioned is being a role model. And part of that is actually joining in that reflection period, because it can be a tricky thing to say how you are feeling about something. If you are feeling nervous about an activity, it can be difficult to stand there amongst other people and say, "No, I didn't like that, it was horrible." Whereas if you can be honest and say, "I was a bit worried about this," yourself, you're showing them how you want the learners to be. And that happens across the board in Foret School, for not just the reflection periods, but for respecting the environment, how you respect each other, how you work creativity, and even how you can play. In some instances, a lot of young people may not really fully understand how to play and develop their own learning in that way. Another way is to show confidence and resilience. And things like, things go wrong. When you're doing, maybe lighting a fire activity, and for the life of you just can't get it to go. And you just have to be there and say, it happens. And you show them, we're not going to give up, we're going to keep going. Or in poor weather, where you have to change what you're doing because it's raining and we have to find shelter and help each other stay warm in a different way. Finally, one of the important parts is to look at risk. What I mean by that in the first instance is that risk is an important part of learning. It is key to challenges. If there is no risk, there's no challenge. You have to risk a failing. You have to risk something to have a real challenge that's there. And to be ready for that, a learner needs to have all those boxes ticked on Maslow's hierarchy. They need to be supported. They need to have their holistic development really secure so that they are able to fail and not knock them back so much. So again, we're going to be observing the learners before we decide that they are ready for risk of a certain activity. They do become more and more ready for challenges as you secure them in that hierarchy in the holistic development. For instance, when we first went out to start our sessions with a new group, they were very reluctant to move around the site, to just go and find something, and they were very much huddled together, very close to you. They wouldn't really want to explore it. But more and more you offer them opportunities to go out, see more space, find more things in a complex way, use the tools and resources in different ways. And through that, sort of like they take risks in it themselves. They're going out and they're playing, finding new ways to push themselves. And after a while, they become more spread out in their groups. They're looking at different ways of learning themselves, and they're playing at different paces, at different experiences, where there is a risk that it's all going to go wrong. It's not always a risk that can be physical. As I said before, it can be an emotional risk that I failed. I don't like that. I feel a bit down about it. But how to deal with that risk and how to manage that as a learner and as helping them manage that as a Foret School leader. Now, again, reflection is an important way of managing that. Letting someone understand that emotionally, if they failed and they're feeling rather down, having a period to say, it's okay, we can try again, we can work together, maybe we can help you get over that. And that helps build more resilient, confident, independent pupils through that challenge, even if they failed at it, because we work together as a group to build them back up again. Most important thing when we're looking at risk is that there's a balance of the benefit that comes out and the risk that is possible, whether that risk be a physical risk or whether it be a mental risk to the people. That there always has to be something that they're going to gain that sort of is important and meaningful for that learner. I think that as a whole, I am learning as well when I go through this Foret School. I don't go out thinking, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this, and it's going to be brilliant, and it's going to work well. And I think that is key to it, that we go out and we be flexible. We observe, we learn, we join in when we can, we model it, and we evaluate that risk. And I think that as a whole is really what being a Foret School leader and what running a Foret School really looks like.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting.
Thank you. Do you have questions now?
If you've got some questions, we can really go.
Thanks, Dan. That was great.
That was really good. Well done for being able to talk at length, unprompted, about Foret Schools. It was really good.
Your passion came across. You've clearly thought a lot about it, and it's clearly helped you to develop. I was going to ask Dan, is there anything you've learned from Foret School that you've taken back into the classroom?
I think that I've tried to do is, in the classroom, build on that sort of independence still. I mean, it seems harder in the classroom because you have a curriculum that you need to head towards. But I want to develop more independence in that. I want them to move off and do their own thing. And luckily we are creating opportunities through the role of science to have some independence and creativity in what they're doing within a science lesson. So, there are aspects of that I'm bringing in, and I think that's important because it's a good way of hooking a child to make them really interested in what they're doing. Is giving them an opportunity to go out and try what they want to try rather than just saying, this is today's lesson, let's do it. And I think that's different. It does have its benefits.
And I think that kind of reflection that you talked about in the class, that review, that plenary, about what we've learned or what we haven't and what we can learn from that, what mistakes I've made and what can I learn.
It's always the thing that you miss. It's always the thing that it's really difficult to bring in. And sometimes maybe you have to lead with a reflection because you've not really done it well enough before because you've had 2 minutes to pack up and get back. And sometimes leading with it, reflecting on the previous session is easier than ending with it as a plenary. But I think that the fact that you need to reflect and understand what you are doing in so many different levels as well is important.
That's a key aspect of learning, isn't it? In Foret Schools and in the classroom.
It made me, in my own reflection, my own practice, it made me very proud that at the end of the sessions we had a bit of a celebration at the campfire and we cooked some food, and the last thing we did was say, okay, one thing you enjoyed from today, one thing you enjoyed from everything, and everyone took away something that was very emotional. They all said something very emotional, very positive, very thoughtful, and it came across, as I said before, they were a group of children from different age groups, from different backgrounds. They might have all been socially awkward in some sort of respect, but at that point in time, they'd become this one group of children who were really passionate about what they did and the links they made with each other in that, in that time. And they did celebrate it, and they were, it made me feel a bit proud at that point in time that they'd really moved on that far, that they could celebrate that together. It was really good.
Can I ask a question about child-led learning?
Yeah.
Because as a Key Stage 2 practitioner, we find that quite difficult, don't we, child-led learning?
Yeah.
In the early years, the child-led learning is kind of an approach and a principle of early years. So how did you overcome that difficulty of kind of letting go of that more adult-led approach that we tend to take in Key Stage 2?
I felt that it was one of the most difficult things I had in my planning, and I've admitted that as I've gone through my course, is that to start with, I wasn't allowing play, I was structuring play, which is possibly more than I should have done. But over time, I began to relax more into my role and they relaxed more into their role, it kind of just grew from the activities I originally offered them. You know, we went out, like we said, we played that wide game where they went around to explore the boundaries of the site. And over time, that grew and expanded into them developing it on their own, and I would end up just either being a part of it or sitting out if, you know, they were happy on their own doing it, if I wasn't invited to join in. And I feel that it was something that I really had to work at and practice at. It wasn't something that, you know, came particularly naturally. But at the same time, it wasn't something that came particularly naturally to the pupils because they were used to having a structure, and you have less of one when you're out there. And I think as we all relaxed, it became more natural and more easy for all of us just to go off and have that access and to the child-led learning and development that was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've got another question.
Yeah.
So you've run a whole set of sessions, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
Which were your first set of sessions as a Foret School leader. What do you take away from that as a practitioner in terms of what have you learned, and what do you think you might do differently in your approach next time to improve the Foret School's experience for your children?
I think that the key is that sort of opportunity of helping them access more child-led play aspects. I think that is the one thing that I really fell down on because I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't ready just to step back. And I feel that when we got to the end of the sessions I was doing, I was so much more relaxed and ready to let them do it, but those sessions had come to an end. And I think now that I'm in a better place, that I can just go and start that more quickly and with a better approach. I think what we did well was care for that social and emotional part of the learners. They're all building on their social and emotional wealth and strengths, and I think that is what we did really well. But how we actually led the sessions and let them free to explore and develop themselves, that was the thing that I think let myself down. So I think that's the thing I'm developing through in the next set. Push further.